Who is the best wide receiver in the NFL with a number in the 80s? Seriously, think about it. I bet you're having a hard time answering the question. In fact, you're probably thinking of somebody that doesn't even wear a number in the 80s at all. The actual answer is Jarvis Landry, who wears number 80. He's the only player with a number in the 80s who ranks among the top 10 at his position in receiving yards through week 4 of this season. Funnily enough, Landry isn't even an 80s guy by choice. His preferred number is 14, but he was forced to switch after moving from Miami to Cleveland in 2018. The next best receiver who wears a number in the 80s? Tyler Boyd, number 83. He ranks 22nd at the position in receiving yards this year. The only other top 50 receivers with numbers in the 80s are the Giants' Sterling Shepard and the Packers' Marquez Valdes-Scantling. In the past year, the two remaining superstar receivers who had jersey numbers in the 80s ditched them. Antonio Brown, who wore number 84 in his 9 seasons with the Steelers, started wearing number 17 after an offseason that saw him go from Pittsburgh to Oakland to New England to, well, nowhere. Amari Cooper, who wore number 89 during his tenure with the Raiders, switched to number 19 after being traded to the Cowboys last October. Of the 198 passing touchdowns thrown in the NFL this season, only 13, 6.6%, have gone to wide receivers wearing numbers in the 80s. There are only 2 players who have numbers in the 80s and could be considered their team's best receiver: Sterling Shepard of the Giants and Corey Davis of the Tennessee Titans. The receivers with jerseys in the 80s are often end-of-roster guys who are assigned whichever numbers were left over in training camp. According to an NFL positional depth chart, just 9 of 77 players listed as starting NFL wide receivers wear numbers in the 80s. That's just under 12%, compared to 25 of 71 backups, just under 22%. There are not many high-numbered receivers. The ones who do exist do not have big roles, and the ones who have big roles are mostly playing poorly. But this shift in jersey number has happened quickly. As recently as 2014, 3 of the top 4 players at the position in terms of receiving yards, Brown, Jordy Nelson, and Demaryius Thomas, all wore numbers in the 80s. Now it's 2 of the top 25 and 4 of the top 50. Yet, let's take a deeper look at the history of this phenomenon in NFL jersey numbers. As the NFL approached modernity, jersey number standardization became the norm. In 1973, the NFL installed uniform restrictions that have more or less remained unchanged to the present day. Per those 1973 rules, receivers were only allowed to wear numbers between 80 and 89. However, teams were allowed to break the rules during training camp, when rosters expanded beyond the 53-man regular season limit, making it hard to fit every player into their proper slots. That was the situation for Keyshawn Johnson when the Jets drafted him first overall in 1996. When Johnson was drafted, the Jets had already issued every number from 80 to 89, so he was assigned number 19. Oddly enough, Johnson loved the number, deciding to keep it even after the numbers in the 80s opened up. An old ESPN article explained that neither the NFL nor the Jets could fully remember why Johnson was allowed to keep wearing number 19 into the regular season. Just that Johnson was, quote, very persistent about it. Johnson was a perfect trendsetter, a brash superstar with dynamic skills and a legion of haters. His number was yet another representation of his unique ways. Other players wanted in, but the league remained steadfast in forcing every other receiver to wear numbers in the 80s for almost a decade. Until 2004, that is, when the league made its first change to its uniform numbering policies in 20 years by opening up numbers 10 through 19 to wide receivers. There was a good justification for this change. The passing game had grown significantly in importance over the course of 3 decades, and the majority of teams were rostering at least 5 receivers. Factor in the presence of 3 tight ends, also required to wear numbers in the 80s, and the fact that many franchises had retired the jersey numbers of a handful of receivers, and teams were simply running out of space. But it was also really cool to wear a number not in the 80s. It soon became a prerequisite for any young incoming star receiver to wear a number in the teens. In 2004, the first year after the rule change, the top 3 wide receivers taken in the draft, Larry Fitzgerald, Roy Williams, and Reggie Williams, all chose to wear number 11 to begin their NFL careers. In the 15 drafts since, only 4 times is the highest drafted receiver chosen to wear a number in the 80s: Calvin Johnson, Demaryius Thomas, Amari Cooper, and Corey Davis. While the increase in receivers wearing lower jersey numbers has been steady, the 80s held surprising relevance at the position for a long time. By 2010, more than half of the top 25 receivers by total yardage were rocking numbers between 10 and 19, but 8 of the top 10 were still guys in the 80s, including stars who predated the rule change like Deandre Johnson, Reggie Wayne, and Santana Moss. It was not until 2013 that a player with a number in the 10 to 19 range, Josh Gordon, led the league in receiving yardage. It wasn't until 2017 that a player with a number in that range, Deandre Hopkins, took the outright lead in receiving touchdowns. Just 5 years ago, high-numbered receivers still dominated the statistical leaderboard. Now, basically every receiving superstar with a number in the 80s, Andre Johnson, Calvin Johnson, Steve Smith, Reggie Wayne, have all retired. The Brown and Cooper defections sealed the deal. But honestly, this trend is logical to me. There's generally a correlation between large numbers and large players throughout the NFL's numbering system. Kickers and quarterbacks get the smallest numbers, then running backs and D-backs, linebackers, O-linemen, and D-linemen. There's not a perfect correlation, but you can picture a scrawny kicker wearing number 1 and a 330-pound nose tackle wearing 99 and get the gist. It tracks that bigger guys get bigger numbers, as if the weight of the number provides heft. Yet, inexplicably, wide receiver numbers were slotted in between those of offensive and defensive linemen, the fastest position group, sandwiched in the middle of the two slowest groups. Why? I'm not sure there's ever been an explanation. Tight ends still have to wear numbers in the 80s, and no receiver wants to be confused with a tight end. And it's not like giving wide receivers numbers in the 80s is common at other levels of football. In fact, it's rare to see a star college receiver with a number in that range. The last Biletnikoff Trophy winner, the award given to the best college wide receiver, to wear a number in the 80s was Oklahoma State's Justin Blackmon in 2011. Before that, it was Pitt's Antonio Bryant all the way back in 2000. There's an aesthetic issue too. 1 is the smallest numeral, while 8 is a digit that takes up the most space. In an ESPN article, Fitzgerald explained that number 11 makes him look sleek. Roy Williams said that a teammate wearing number 88 looks like a big box out there. At this point, it's clear that wideouts love smaller numbers. The only question left is whether any wide receiver will make the 80s cool again. But now, I switch it over to you. Comment down below. What are your thoughts on this jersey number trend? Who is the best receiver wearing a number in the 80s in the NFL? Share the video with your friends and leave a like if you enjoyed. Feel free to subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RespectThePoint. I also want to give a special shout out to Roger Sherman of The Ringer for investigating this topic. That is all for this video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.